Radio Mechanic here. Today on the bench we have one of my favorite old pieces of equipment. It's my old Pro 2004 scanner from Realistic or Radio Shack. And I bought this new, I can't even tell you how long ago it was, and it has been doing yeoman's duty in the background, monitoring aircraft guard band and aircraft air-to-air frequencies, local ham repeaters. I used to have it listening for ham radio satellites, the local fire department, and the highway department during stormy weather. I like to know what's going on. Can't listen to the police anymore, unfortunately. They're all scrambled in this area, but there's still a lot of activity. And this thing's been sitting there chugging away for many years. However, as may be evident, the backlight is just about gone. That's the low power setting, and that's the high setting. And the camera must be real sensitive to green light, because it sure looks bright in the viewfinder, but I'll tell you, in the real world, that thing just is difficult to read. If I turn on the overhead lights in here, I can hardly see it. Right now it's pretty dark in the lab. They used to sell an electroluminescent replacement kit for this. This uses an electroluminescent panel behind the LCD to illuminate the window here, the screen. But I went on eBay and I found a vendor selling little electroluminescent panels for a reasonable price. I think it was about $6, shipping included. The problem is, this is about 1.25 inches wide, and the electroluminescent panel in here has to be about 1.16 inches wide. But I seem to remember from years past that you can cut these on a paper cutter, and as long as it doesn't delaminate, they still work. If they do delaminate, you can use some shipping tape, packing tape, to put them back together. At least that's my hope. And it should brighten up the display considerably. Now I'm going to hit this thing with about half its rated voltage. You can see how bright that is, and in the camera anyway. And it's not nearly as bright in person, but you can see it's far brighter than this is. This is low setting, essentially. That's high setting on the upper one. Low setting is virtually invisible. If I hit it with about its rated voltage, you can see it really brightens up and just about wash it. Well, it's washing the camera out. It's not, and again, it's not nearly that bright in person. So I'm going to turn the lights back on and we'll start tearing this thing apart, and you'll be with me for my success or my failure, however it comes out. And we'll pick up here in just a minute after I get things organized. And here we are. The lights are back on. We have our paper cutter out, and I just noticed my battery's flashing on the camera here, so keep our fingers crossed for the next minute or two. Now, I have had this apart, and I know that it turns out this is actually 1.5 inches wide, by the way. I know that the one inside the radio is 1.16 inches. So I'm going to cut this about 1 1/32 inches, as best I can judge it on here. It's not real critical. Keep our fingers crossed. Here we go. Well, that cut fairly easily. It didn't seem to delaminate. Sure enough, the battery died, but that's okay. We had most of that. We didn't miss much. Oops, I got the camera in the way. And I know that the length of this piece is 4... Whoa! Almost lost it. Is 4 inches and 1/32. 4/32. Again, this is not real critical. I'm going to cut the thing just about 4 inches long. There's plenty of overlap on the end of this. So here's our second cut. Now we have a panel which did not delaminate. I'm very happy to see that. And I should be able to slip this right into place of the original and have my backlight back. But before I do that, I'm going to test the thing and just make sure I'm not wasting my time opening the radio up. So again, give me a second and we are going to power this thing up and make sure it's still functional. Alright, we have it on the bench and we'll power it up now that it's cut and make sure it's still working. And sure enough, it is. That white band you see in the viewfinder is just reflection from the overhead lighting. And there we are. We've cut it down to size. It should slip right in there. And by the way, all I'm using to power this up is a little 12 volt transformer, 110 in and 12 out. And I'm just backfeeding either 6 or 12 volts in so that I can test the thing. The beauty of these is they're basically nothing but a capacitor, and you don't have to worry about current limiting as long as you stay within the rated voltage. And I think these are good up to at least a couple hundred volts. They'll work anywhere from about 80 to a couple hundred volts. You should be fine. No current limiting required. They self-limit. Basically a capacitor. You know, they're going to have a slight inrush, and that's it. And with something of this size, it's not going to be much of an inrush. I'm talking a few, handful of picofarads probably. Okay, we'll move along. Righto, we have our benchtop ionizer up and running to eliminate any static on the benchtop. I have my wrist strap on, and I have sprayed the area, my chair and the floor, the carpet. I have a carpeted lab here. I've sprayed the floor with cling-free. Oh, actually, this one's Static Guard. Same thing. Basically, it's alcohol with some fragrance and an aerosol can. Makes the room smell good, if nothing else. It actually does a pretty fair job of knocking down static for a couple of hours anyway. It does eventually evaporate. Every couple of hours you have to retreat. But when you're sitting in a chair, I know these chairs produce a lot of static, especially if I have my flannel shirt on, and therefore I take the precaution of spraying everything down with Static Guard. And I've proven many times to different people that it does an excellent job. We don't want to take any chances. By the way, this radio was built, or the manual says it was 1986. So shockingly to me, this radio I purchased 30 years ago. I've unplugged the radio. Before I did, I made sure that my backup battery was in good shape. The memory battery. The manual claims it will hold memory for a period of time, probably long enough to swap out to a new battery. But it would be real annoying to work on the receiver, get the backlight working, and then find out you have to program everything back into it. This is not programmable via computer like my newer radios are, which means I'd end up entering 100 and something odd channels by hand, punching the keypad. And that's not a lot of fun. I've got better things to do. So we've taken the 4 screws off the back of this, and the case should slide right off. There are some little cardboard, I don't know what to call them, fillers, bumpers inside the case that sometimes the chassis hangs up on. But if you're careful, it will slide right out. And we'll get the cord pulled out of here. Put that off to the side where it won't do any damage. Now we have to remove these 4 screws, 2 on each end, to release the front panel. And I should have some... By the way, the screws on stuff that's built in Japan are not the same specifications or the same dimensions as US screws. So the Phillips screws don't fit a lot of US screwdrivers. You can find these sets of screwdrivers on eBay or various tool places that are designed to actually properly fit Japanese screws, so you don't end up damaging the heads. We've got the 2 on that end. Oops, gotta be careful here. Take the 2 off of this end, make sure we're still in the frame. We are. Now, if I remember correctly, there should be a couple of connectors I can release, and this should swing away and give me room to work. We have one here for the keypad. Carefully work that loose. Don't want to damage these, they'd be a real chore to fix. That doesn't go to the front. This should be the display. If I remove that one, I should now have enough room. I shouldn't have to disconnect the ground. I should be able to carefully maneuver this thing around. There we go. And get to the display board. And let's make sure that's okay. The board has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws, and the entire display assembly should lift out of here and make it much easier to do surgery. So there's 1, 2, 3, and the last one. There's a rubber gasket here. You want to make sure that stays in place and doesn't get lost. I'm going to set that down, gather up the screws so they don't get misplaced. And we'll set this assembly aside. We don't need this for the moment. Now when I flip this over, here's our LCD, and we want to be very, very careful with this. This is made from unobtainium. You break that, you're done. Finished. Here are the 2 wires for the backlight. And here on the end, you see this little tan colored glop of stuff. I don't know what it is exactly. It's some sort of adhesive. And what I did when I took this apart initially was I took the edge of a razor blade and very carefully just teased this away from the electroluminescent panel. That's the only thing holding it in there. At that point, the panel will slide out. So I'm going to get the soldering iron warmed up, slip these 2 wires out of here, and by the way, this is AC, so there's no polarity problems. It works either direction. But the white wires you can see is on the right and the orange one's on the left, so we'll do that when we put it back together, but it should make absolutely no difference whatsoever. Let me get the soldering iron warmed up and we'll be back. The panel I purchased from eBay, by the way, you should mark the back side. It's not absolutely obvious which side is the side that's going to fluoresce. I happen to know this is the side that does. You can see that the wires or the connections come out on the opposite side. That's not going to be a problem. There's plenty of room in here. I've taken the 2 wires off. I'm going to slide the old panel out. We'll remove it from behind the LCD. We'll slide the new panel, hopefully, right back in its place. And it's getting a little bit snug. So I suspect what happened is when I cut this, sometimes the paper cutter cuts on a bit of a taper, and in fact, I can see a slight taper. I probably should have taped this down on the paper cutter before I cut it. I'm going to take a slight trim cut on this, and then we'll slip it back in place. We've put it in the paper cutter, and all I did is trim about 30 thousandths, that's about a 32nd of an inch, just from about here to here. I could have pushed it in, but I did not want to take a chance on it delaminating. And as you may or may not be able to see, you can see right through that LCD. Just slightly smoky in appearance. I'm just going to slide this guy in, and I'm going to use something, probably this little screw. I don't want to use that screwdriver. I'll take this. Just to lift gently so that it will slide into the guide on the far end. There it goes. And it's in position. And you can see it fits very well. Virtually the same thing as the one that came out. The active surface on this one may be a little bit wider than the original, but that's not going to hurt anything. It's masked when it's in the unit. You can only see to about there on the display anyway. What I need to do now is remove these two wires, transfer them over to the new display or the new backlight, solder the connections back in, and we'll wire everything back up. We should be in business. I don't think I'm going to have to glue this in place like the old one was. It comes up against the capacitors on the far end, and the wires should be stiff enough to hold it in here. It's not going to go anywhere, so I'm not going to glue it into place. And we'll get the wires taken care of. There you have it. The new fluorescent panel is in place. The two wires are soldered on. And remember, the white wire went to the centralmost connection, the orange one went to the outside connection. They were the other side, but again, it's AC. It really doesn't matter. And as I thought, the wires are more than strong enough to keep it in place. It's not going to slide out. It has nowhere to go once the gasket's in place anyway. So I'm not going to glue that. I've cleaned my greasy fingerprints off the glass. And again, when you're doing this, be extremely careful with this LCD. You break that piece of glass, you're done. The one thing I do like about this is it doesn't have those stupid zebra strips making connection. These are actually soldered to the board. I suppose you could find a dead 2004 and get the display board if you broke this, but just be careful. You won't have to bother. You'll probably end up paying as much for this as you did for the scanner originally. We'll put everything back together and we'll give it a go. I have put two of the screws holding the front panel in place on. I didn't put them all in yet. We're going to find out whether I'm hero or zero at this point. We'll plug the unit in, and this is the moment of truth. Either you get to cheer me or laugh at me. It lit up. That's in the dim position, and I can see it right now. The dim position is as bright as the bright position was on the old display. And that's the bright position. It's not quite as bright as I remember the original being. Let me get some of these reflect. Oh, it's probably the overhead light. Let me turn off the overhead light here. Don't need my wrist strap anymore. Okay, the overhead light is off. That's pretty good. It's a heck of a lot better. As I say, that dim position is as bright as it was before on the high position or bright position. And the bright position is absolutely readable in normal room light. And again, I don't think it's quite as bright as this original panel was. This original panel is quite a bit thicker, and it's got a foil backing, and perhaps was designed for a slightly lower voltage. But at any rate, the display is now quite readable. Even in the dim setting, it's quite readable. Before, in normal room light, if I click that off, you couldn't see it. I'm going to turn off all the lights here. Oh my gosh, in a darkened room, that's going to be perfect. Absolutely perfect. And the bright setting is bright. I call that a win. I'm going to put the rest of the screws back in, put the chassis back together, and we'll pick up from there. I just took a quick look on eBay for anybody interested in doing this. I got these from glowhut.com, and I thought I'd paid around $8, $9. It turns out it was about $13 for that. That's still a bargain. I am very, very pleased to have this thing back up and running again. It was worth the $13. However, I just noticed that they have no more green ones in stock and no more blue ones in stock. They have 21 white ones in stock. However, I found another vendor out of China that's selling 1.25 inch wide, which is what this was. This was 1.5 inch wide. They have 1.25 inch wide by 2 feet long, including a 12-volt driver for the thing, a 12-volt converter, that will get you up and running for the same price. So there are alternatives, even though Glow Hut no longer has the green ones. If you want to live with the white one, that's fine, I suppose. I prefer the green for the display. But at any rate, if you want to go that route or have any interest in fixing one of these, they are available. So let me get this thing slid back in and put in position, and we'll finish up. And there we have it, tucked away back in its home. The display is readable from well across the room now. I am extremely pleased with how that came out. And looking at it in a semi-darkened area, I think it probably is just about as bright as it was brand new. It just didn't look very bright directly under that glaring fluorescent. So now, while I'm sitting over here at the operating position, playing with my radios, I can keep track of what's going on with the aircraft and the local repeaters and what have you. And we'll call that a successful repair. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found some useful information. I would really appreciate a thumbs up, and subscribe if you'd like. It costs nothing. You won't get a bunch of junk email. It just moves me up in the ranking in YouTube and brings more people into my videos. Take care. Until next time. This is the Radio Mechanic. See you.